Welcome back to part 2 of mini greenhouses, and this is actually 2014, and I wanted to share a few of the things that I learned from last year. First of all, we had a terrible spring. June was horrible, so the plants grew like crazy, but no fruit to speak of or flowers, and a lot of those plants got to be 5 feet tall. So I'm cutting back some, but I'm growing different varieties. However, I'm not going to be using the peat pots this year or the Jiffy 7s. First of all, because they're kind of expensive, and second of all, they all had to be transplanted out of there by the way before we ever got them outside, so there really was no point. So this year I'm going to start them in these little plastic trays. These I all got from the recycling center, and most of them come with a little tear in them or something, so if you have a little tear, just use your tape, and I put tape on both sides. This one has no tears. One of them has a tear. This one has the tear. As you can see, they're a little torn. And so all I'm going to do is put a piece of tape on the outside, and I'll put one more piece in the inside, and I will actually throw these away when I'm done because they are fragile. But these are free, and you can have the kids bring them in or whatever you want to do. The problem is a lot of these do not have any holes in them for drainage. These kind do, that the berries come in. They have lots of holes, as a matter of fact, too many holes. And so again, I took the soldering iron very carefully, burnt little teeny holes in them. However, I'm worried about some of these leaking too much out. So what I'm going to do is just put a piece of paper towel in there, or you can put in a piece of like this landscape fabric, or a little piece of cotton in there should be fine. So that when you go to plant these, basically get your stuff in there and get your dirt in there. And the object of this is to get all of the seeds to come up in this tray and then transplant them out of here into the milk cartons or whatever you're going to use. So I'm just kind of filling this. Let me zoom in a little. And remember to moisten your soil. Actually, this is a seed starting mix, and that's enough to probably start 50 to 100 seeds. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I've got some Rutgers I'm going to do here, and I've opened them up and I look, there's like, oh, there's about 40, 50 in there. There's another 40, 50 in this one. And I'm just going to sprinkle these on. I'll try to even this out. And to sprinkle them on, I'm going to get them out of here. I'm going to put them in my hand because I like to spread them out myself, so that you're just kind of try not to get too many in one spot. And what's going to happen is that as soon as all these are in here, I'm going to cover these with about 1/4 inch of the same starting mix and pack it down a little bit and get the whole thing wet. And I'm going to let these germinate all in this tray. And after about 2 weeks, they'll have, well, probably 3 weeks, they'll have the second set of leaves in here, and I'll just take a spoon and carefully lift these out, wash off the roots, and then put these into the milk cartons. And let me show you what I'm going to do in a second. This is one of them. Okay. So that's just one of them. And I have, this is for my peppers. The peppers, not too many came to a pack. I don't even like peppers, but I'm going to start some for some friends. As part of our recycling program, we have the kids at school, or you can have your kids bring home their little milk cartons. These are all chocolate ones. They've all been opened and rinsed. They kind of look like that. And all you got to do is pop them open and rinse them out. The problem with these is they're plastic lined, and if you get them wet, they'll just sit and rot. So you need to get something like this, which is a hollow gasket punch, fairly small hole. Do not punch these on your good table. You'll put holes in it. You'll actually pop the formica off, but a piece of old formica is great. I have a hard piece here. Last year what I discovered is I used the milk cartons that I get from the school, and of course they have no drainage and they're plastic coated, so they won't let water through at all. So you need to punch a hole. And what I used, I got a full gasket set. I'll show you this, another one. This was Pittsburgh. It came from one of the tool companies. And here's the gasket set, and normally I would weld a piece on here so I can get in here and do that, and I thought that's horrible. So what I did is I cut this piece of 2x4, and I made this piece, basically it's 1.5 inches by 2 inches, and then on top of this I cut out a plastic piece from an electrical box with a small saw, don't cut yourself, and I screwed it onto here. And what that allows you to do is to put these upside down on here, and then In the thinner spot, there's a thicker spot, and there's a thinner spot. You can just take your hammer, and as you see, you get your 2 holes, and those need to be there. However, I used the whole carton last year, and it made the trays so heavy that these plastic trays wanted to fold in half, even with 2 or 3 of them on here, and the plants got so big they were like small trees, and I really don't need that. So this year what I'm doing is I'm cutting all the milk cartons down to where the fold is, which gets rid of about 1/3 of the weight. So that I can probably keep these in the plastic trays. That way I can fit 2, 4, 6, about 8 of these trays into each of my little mini greenhouses, and I have several. This is one of the lights that I found the basic directions for this on the internet, and I like their design, but I didn't like their electrical much. Basically, it's a piece of 4-inch heating pipe that I've straightened out. The one on the internet had pieces of threaded rod through here to keep it out, but this is small enough, it doesn't really need it. And this bracket in here, let me move in a little bit so you can see it. This bracket is actually out of a ceiling lamp that has 2 bulbs in it, although this is a new one. I bought these at a home center. They're kind of hard to find, but you can get them on the internet. And the nice thing about this is that it's threaded on both ends, and I was able to put the ground wire up through here and ground this whole device. And also these connections that are in here, they're shrink wrapped. They've been soldered first of all, and then shrink wrapped to keep the water out, so that these are relatively safe. Make sure you wire these correctly, and if there's kids around, don't even turn it on while they're around. But this is properly wired, and if you're uncomfortable with that, find an electrician or somebody who knows how to do this. But these work real well, and I'm actually going to put 2 of these, one on each side of the top. And these are 60 watt equivalent bulbs, which are actually 13 watts each. So that'll work quite well. Another project. So let's go to the rest of our video, and good luck. We had a wonderful season, tons of stuff. I'm growing about 5 times the number of tomatoes, and I'm adding peppers and some flowers this time. Here's my little mini greenhouse. It's set up in front of the door wall. This is the last day of winter here in northern Michigan. As you can see, it's not very nice. It's decided to snow a lot. Let me uncover the greenhouse for a bit, because the cover comes right off of it. If you see in the top, I've got 2 lights set up in the top, and I have some of these little peat pots that come with a little grid on them, and they come flat. I'll show you those in a minute. Below that I have a solid tray that's holding water, which is where I can soak things. Down below I have another tray that I just used a starting mix in, and it just sits here, but those have to go in the water. Then down below I have another tray. This is a busing tray from like restaurants. You can get them at Costco, Sam's Club, stuff like that. Another very important part here is a thermometer with a humidity guide of some kind on it. And right behind it, I have a little teeny 12-volt fan that's just blowing air down over the tank of water, which helps humidify them. When you set up one of these greenhouses by a bright window, whenever a weekend comes and you're not home or it's at school, if you set this by a bright window where it gets full sun and it's closed up over the weekend, you'll just fry everything. You don't want to do that. Maybe the best thing to do is move it away from the window so it's a lot darker, so the sun doesn't hit it directly, and keep it going. A little bit about electricity. I don't know everything, but I can advise you a little bit, but it's up to you. You do what you want. The best rule around kids in schools is don't have any electricity with a greenhouse and water. That's the safest it can be. If you do have electricity, you should consult with your school and your maintenance staff and your science staff to see what's the safest thing. What I have is, I have a GFI. I'll show you a picture of one. These are about $10 or $12. If you're going to use a plug at school or at home, you should really have one of these. And if you don't have one of these, you should have them install one. But I know in some schools, you're more likely to have them build you a $100,000 greenhouse than to install one of those. If you can't get one of those, here's 2 pictures. I found one. It's an adapter that goes into a plug that's a GFI-CA, which is a ground fault circuit interrupter. If there's any electrical leakage of any kind, it trips the circuit. So it's about as safe as you can be. They're around $30 or left. You can get one that plugs right into your socket and then has a triple socket on the end of it. Or you can buy just a short one that fits on and plugs right into the socket and has a place to plug in a power bar on the back. Whatever you do, keep the electricity out of the water, keep your controls behind it where the kids can't touch, and be safe. Quite often you're in a spot where electricity from the is necessary because you don't have enough light. This is one of the typical old type clip lamps that we used to use. They got newer ones. Let me get a newer one and show you. All right, they look fairly the same. If you were to buy one of these at one of the home stores, they're about $7. And if you look at the new clamps they have on a lot of them, they're much more substantial. So you can clamp this into your structure. The safest place on your structure, I usually put them inside on top of the shelf. That might not be safe enough for you. You can actually clamp these to something outside and shine right through the plastic. If you notice, I'm using these CFL bulbs, these fluorescent bulbs. This is a 13 watt, which is equivalent to a 60 watt incandescent light bulb. This is a regular incandescent light bulb. Occasionally, if it's too cold in there, and it does get that way, my house goes down to 60 at night, and when that's sitting near the door wall, it'll get down to 50. That's a little too cold. So I actually put a 75 or a 60 watt bulb in here and just set it inside towards the bottom and turn it on. And that'll usually take it up to 55 or 60, which is pretty good. So these are pretty good. Let me get you a fan. I'm going to show you a little fan. These are a little trickier. The fan that I have running in my greenhouse is sitting on one of the shelves, and it's protected so that the water doesn't drip on it or anything. However, we had a GFI and this fell in the water, it probably wouldn't do anything. This is a 12 volt fan, DC. This is out of one of my old desktop computers, and it's still very serviceable. There's 3 wires. There's a red, black, and a yellow. You don't use the yellow. That was to tell it how fast it was going so you could look in your computer and see what speed the fans were running. You only need the red and the black. And if you got a techie guy that can hook this up to a small DC power supply like runs a lot of the laptops, this would be pretty safe to put in there. But you'll have to check it out yourself. A fan is nice because it keeps the humidity going. With the fan blowing down towards the water, my little humidity gauge stays around 50–55%. Now during the day, I open that up, shut the fan off, let it dry out because it's good for the plants to be damp, and then dry and damp. Well, now I want to show you some of the things about growing in your little greenhouse. There's another company that makes these. They're called Jiffy 7s or Jiffy 9s. They're peat pellets. There's really no dirt, but there's peat moss and minerals and stuff in here to support your plants. There's like a little net around them. And they come perfectly flat, and you pour warm water in here and they pop up. And in order to make these work, you have to take a pencil and loosen it up a little bit, make a little hole, put your seeds in there, and then tamp them back down. But don't take them out of the tray, because once they're out of the tray, when they're getting filled up with water, if you take them out of those little holes and they expand, you can't get them back in. So, but these come like this. It came in a kit, something like this, and I think these were about $7. Of course, the peat things aren't in here because I've taken them all out. And it comes with the bottom tray is waterproof, which is nice, but it also comes with a top dome. And that's so that if you don't have one of these greenhouses, you could set this up somewhere and it would keep it nice and humid and let your plants get germinated. However, don't stick this out where it's going to be sunny because it'll cook them. So again, it's good to keep them humid, but if they're going to be out where it's sunny, you got to take these off and make sure it's not too cold. So those are nice. But as long as we're talking about recycling a little bit, I try to recycle. Okay, you don't have to recycle. You can go to your store and you can buy. This has 72 little plastic inserts in here where you put 72 plants in it. I don't know, that's about $3. This one also comes with a little greenhouse thing that's on the back of it, so you can buy them for $2 without that greenhouse piece. But that's not where I get them. These are from last year. As my neighbors plant all their plants and throw away all these plastics, I collect them. And if you notice, there is holes in these. So these could be put in here and set in that other tray that has the water. It would fill these up. If you're going to do this, you need to wash them. I put about a teaspoon of bleach in water, and I have one of those big gray trays, bussing trays. And I actually take these and I set them sideways in that tray and get them all wet, let them soak for about a half hour. Then I take them out, take like a baby bottle brush or a test tube brush or something, and wash every one of them, get as much as you can out of it. And then when you're done with these, take each one and just rinse them off, let them dry. But this is the best way, and you can write on them what they are. You can also make plant markers. Plant markers are real inexpensive. The trouble is you can't find anybody that's got them. You have to send away for them. Let me get the other piece, and I'll show you what I do for plant markers, part of the recycling things. Now, one of the issues you'll have is that if you're using these, particularly if you got tomatoes and stuff in them, the tomato roots will all grow out of these and want to grow into the next one. If you're doing that, you're going to want to transplant these into something else. These are very good. I have tons of these. These are yogurt containers, and these are the newer shapes, which actually are a little better. They're the same size, but they don't tip over so much. But there is one problem with them. They're solid. And if you fill those with water and stuff, they will just sit and rot everything. What I have somewhere, probably don't want the kids to do this, but if you just take a soldering iron and melt 2 holes, and sometimes 3 of these, and if you're doing a lot of seeds at once, which is what I use these Cool Whip containers for, I'll put 4 or 5 holes in this, and then I can literally fill this with a seed mix, sprinkle the seeds all over it, put a fine mist of the planting stuff on top of it, pack it down and wet it. Once these have 2 sets of leaves, you can lift them out carefully with a spoon, and you can transplant these into these. And since a lot of you are looking at this because you're a school teacher, the little milk cartons that you use at school are great to transplant into. I'll be right back. And for those of you that are recycling, I stopped at the home center and they have a Venetian blind cutting machine. Now some of these are aluminum, some of them are plastic, but most of them are plastic. And these make great little labels. I know you can buy little labels. If you just go like this and you use a magic marker on these, you can stick these in your plants. Although I warn you with kids, make sure you write on the side of the container too, because sometimes they lift out their names and put somebody else's in it. One other consolation of cutting the tops off of these is that you no longer need to weld a piece on here or make that other bracket. Here's a piece of countertop that I bought at one of the home centers, and that was 99 cents because it's a leftover. With this countertop, you can find your thinner pieces, which they're only 1 thickness. You don't want to punch through this other one. Hit them hard, that's the way they go, but those are free. Just make sure you wash them. I rinse them out when I get them at the cafeteria at the school, and that does a pre-rinse, and then I take them down to another area with a big sink and I rinse them real good and let them dry all night, and then I bring them home because it's quite a mess in your house. Especially now, if you're a school teacher and this is your first time, you're going to want to buy all this stuff. This is a kit. It comes with, this is I think a 72 cell. There's 72 little individual places to put plants. And it comes with its own little plastic dome underneath that can go on top also. And I think these were $3 or $4. About $1 for anything you buy. The dome is $1. You know, all the inserts are $1, and the waterproof tray it sits in is $1. I just bought one to show you. That's not what I buy. What I do is I collect them from the year before. And here's a tray, and here are all the little inserts. These are from my neighbor. However, if you're going to use these from outside, you know, they got bugs and things in them, so this is a typical busing tray you can get at Sam's Club or Costco, places like that. And what's nice about these, they're nice and deep, and I have about that much water in it. And in that, I put about a teaspoon, I should say tablespoon of bleach into this. And then I put all these in there and let them soak for about 15-20 minutes, and then I take a baby bottle brush and scrub them all out, and take another brush and do the outside of them all. Make sure you get off all the dirt that you can and things. That'll get rid of any insects and diseases and stuff that are on it. And then when you're done, take these to the sink and rinse all these off and let all these dry before you use them. And you can write on these with a magic marker once they're dry. And I recommend with kids that you very carefully mark everything and grow extra ones, because a few might die with your kids at school. And when theirs looks pretty sick on Friday, after they leave, you can take one out and put another one in, and you can tell the kids how wonderful it did over the weekend. You don't want them to be disappointed. But that's one thing you can do. Also, I have a big tarp down here because I'm actually in my living room on the carpet with that bleach. If you get it on your clothes or get it on the carpet, it could discolor it, so be careful with that. Another thing that works quite well, these are the yogurt containers, and they've come with a new design now. But the trouble with all these is that you have to be able to water them, and after the seeds are up and stuff, you really don't want to water things from the top. It'll promote dampening off, and your plants look wonderful, and all of a sudden you look the next morning, they'll all be keeled over and dead. So you have to provide drainage on these, and I just have a small soldering iron here, and depending on the age of your kids, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to carefully put 3 holes in it, and that's about all it takes. A little smelly in your house. In the classroom, the kids might enjoy it. So you do your 3 holes. And you can use the Cool Whip containers. They make pretty good. I'm making 4 in this one. The reason for the holes is that if you don't, the water will sit and it'll tend to rot your plants, and that won't make them happy. So you can have your kids bring these in if you're a school teacher, and give them a little extra credit for this and for bringing plant containers. Maybe all this video is going to do is get you ready for next year. So watch the soldering irons, the kids can get burned on that. What I want to show you next is the potting soil mix. You can get all kinds. You can get great big bales of it, stuff like this. One of the issues that I mentioned before is that it's so dry. And here's some I took out and did not get it wet. If you were to plant stuff in these, I've actually let these little plant containers sit in about that much water all night, and it still didn't get wet all the way up. So I find you're way ahead to get it wet in the first place. So watch your trays. There's several kinds. Most of the trays that come with these actually are solid. They don't leak or anything. Here's the other yogurt containers. These I actually punched some holes in it. And I'm going to get out my seed mix. I have a solid tray here that I'm going to pour it into, and make sure you have a tarp or something down because this stuff tends to go everywhere. It's a little clumpy yet, but it's fairly wet. And so what I'm going to do, first of all, mark them. You can put little markers. I went to the home store, and these are the little mini blind pieces that they cut off for people to make them the right length. If you just go ask them, they have a whole tray under the machine where the blinds are, and they'll give you these. And there's plastic ones and the metal ones. I don't use the metal ones. I have scissors here, but anyway, you take the scissors and you just cut a little point in it, and then the kids can write their names on these and put them in the plants. Also write them on the outside because these get moved around by the kids. Another recycling project. So I'm going to mark these. I'm going to plant some Marglobe. So I've written right on here, Marglobe. And I'm just going to fill this up. Get it fairly full, pack it down. And the seeds are kind of hard to get to. I put them out on a paper towel. I'm going to just put a couple here. I'm just going to put one in here, put a little bit on top, and pack it down. Now this can go in the tray of water, which I have sitting over in the other stand. So there's just one that I'm going to do. I'm going to do a bunch more since those other ones did not take very well. Also, after you do these, I'm going to plant a bunch of these. There's 48 of these. The other one that I bought had, I think, 72 in it. You want to pick how many you want, depending on how big you want the plant to grow in there. I'm going to mark on here. Another thing I wanted to discuss is the back of these packages. I'm going to hold up one of the tomato packages and show you the directions. There's a lot of good. Make sure that it's the correct date lot for 2013 or whatever years you're doing this. Some seeds you can keep for a couple of years, but you can't always count on it. Also in there, it tells you exactly how deep to plant them. If you look at the burpee ones here that I have, it tells you exactly how deep, about how many days it takes for them to come up. And if you follow that, they're pretty good. Most of these plants like a 60 watt bulb below them, not near enough to get them too hot, but just to warm them up to 70, 75, and they'll come up in a couple days. I'm going to plant some more marigolds. Make sure you write on them, because you sure won't remember later. And particularly when they first come up, all of them look alike. The first seedling leaves that you see, they all look alike. And if I get these out, I have these marigold. These are called Cracker Jacks, and this is a mixed color. What I like about these, you can intersperse them around your plants, and these smell to the bugs. The bugs don't like them. The deer don't like them. And this says to plant them, the flowers are 4 to 5 inches, and the seed spacing about 1 inch apart if you're planting them in the ground. And this says to plant them 1/4 inch deep and keep them at about 70 degrees. So, a lot of these, particularly these come hundreds to a package because there's thousands in each flower when they get them out. I'm just going to take and put one in each of the little containers. If you have the kids do that, they'll get piles of them in there, but that's okay. So there's 4, and I have marked them, and I'm just going to press them in a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit on the top, pack them in, and that's all there is to it. And you can have the kids do these. The kids they have a great time doing it. Here's one of my other greenhouses. I've set up two. This one's going outside in a little while when it gets nicer, but it's not nice yet. Here's some of the cocoa pellets. And these are tomato plants mostly that are about 3 weeks old. However, I started a bunch more just in a regular potting mix down below. And these are 2 weeks old. And these actually look a little better and are growing better than the other ones, so who knows. I'm going to transplant some of these out of here. They're 2 and 3 in a pot here, so I'm going to yank those out and put them in individual pots. These up here have actually started to grow right through their coconut pellets and sticking out a lot, and I think I'm just going to peel the netting off and transplant some of those into bigger cartons. I may be using milk cartons, the small milk cartons from school, or the little yogurt containers, but it's time for these to come out. We had some germination issues, and I've cured that. Down here I actually have a 75 watt regular incandescent bulb, which gets pretty warm. So don't get it near the plastic or anything, and it's just underneath these other trays. Down on the bottom there's extra water, which helps. It's about 65 down there. As you can see here, this shelf's about 70. When we come up here, this shelf is about 75, somewhere between 70 and 75, which is pretty good for sprouting things. These are actually tomatoes that they say take 7 to 10 weeks to, or 7 to 10 days to come up. They came up in 2 days. And here I have some more over here, which are in a little different, these are in the yogurt containers. Those haven't quite come up, but they're a little heavier and it takes them longer to get the heat through them. So, but it's working quite well. These have to come out of here soon. We still have some snow outside and it's raining to beat the band, so we do have fluorescent lights on some of them. And actually, I've been considering putting 6 of these reflectors up here with the fluorescent lights in here to get lots of light up there. Here's some romaine lettuce right on the very end here that I planted, and it doesn't like it. They're getting all scraggly. There's not enough light for them. The tomatoes are okay. They're all leaning towards the light. If you notice, they're all up on a 2x4 tipped towards the light. Same thing up here. They're all tipped. So they'll all be leaning towards the light by late tonight, and tomorrow I'll just turn the trays around. That keeps them going. And as soon as it's nice outside, this whole thing's going outside, and make sure you have a thermometer in here. You don't want this thing closed with full sun on it. It'll cook them. So these are parsley that I've marked it, and it's in one of these. It's just a Cool Whip container with some stuff in it. I just broadcast them on, spread them out as well as I could get them, and put a light dusting of the starting mixture on it and packed them in and let them sit. Parsley is really slow at coming up. This is about 3 weeks. This is a good way to start a lot of your seeds, because then you know that something's going to grow in each little thing. And the best way to get these out of here is, I wouldn't normally take these out because there's not 2 sets of leaves yet. There's only 1. But you can actually just go in with a fork, and they pop out just like that. And you can see the roots hanging out of the bottom, and rinse those off carefully. Hold onto the leaf, not the stem. And then you can put these into, you can carefully put them in with, partially fill them with the mix, and carefully put these in there, and they'll do just fine. Another thing I wanted to try is I have some Sweet 100s here also that, I don't know if you can see it, but there's 4 of them coming out of there, and they've just started to have the roots come out. I'm going to see if I can get this one apart. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to carefully cut off this netting in several spots. I can just see I cut one root, but they're pretty tough. I've never tried taking one of these apart. They're really like a peat moss, so I'm soaking it in water and just very carefully shaking it. Do not handle these by the stems. Just pick them up. They just, see how it still has the root ball there? That can still be shook farther, so that all the dirt off. Be very careful. They're very fragile at this point. And as you can see, they tease right apart. So I think all 4 of those are going to be okay, and I'm going to plant these into the recycled yogurt containers. So I'm only going to fill it up part way, and then I'm going to hold it in there and carefully put dirt around it. So I'm holding it by the leaf, Set her in there very carefully. Try to keep even starting mix on both sides. Get it in there so it looks happy. And there we are. She looks pretty happy. And so now, instead of just having to rip out the other ones, because you really only should have one growing here, I'm going to have 4 of them in here. So they're pretty easy, just be careful. Again, only handle it by the leaves. And by the way, the first set of leaves on all the plants look identical. You basically cannot tell any of them apart by their first leaves. The second set of leaves are different. You can tell tomatoes and everything else apart by that. So I've got 2 going. Make sure the soil is damp enough that if you squeeze it, it kind of balls up a little. And if you pick it up by the stem, you'll damage the stem and it'll just die off on you. So this is something if you have older kids, if you have junior high, high school, or even upper L, they could probably do this carefully. And if they don't do it right, they just will die. And there's some experience there. I usually don't do it with this little tray. It's just too hard to see it with the black trays. I usually do it with a big tray. And we're going to set that one in there. And we're going to watch the progress of these. Every year I do something a little different to see which one grows best. And we'll have a good idea. So I now have 4 of these cherry tomatoes, and if you notice, they're all labeled, even the milk cartons, as long as you label them when they're not wet. That one's not labeled. I'm going to have to label it. I have my marker right here, so I will do that. Well, if nothing else, you know what you need for next year. Start getting kids to bring in your trays, clean them, get them all ready. Get one of these little mini greenhouses. Watch when the seed starting season is over. They tend to sell these for next to nothing. I think I've bought them for $10. They're fairly sturdy. They're very well coated with paint. They don't seem to rust very easily at all. So I would think that you would get several years out of one of these. And with a little tape, you can protect the cover. But if you can buy them cheap, get 2. You always can take spare parts out of one and adapt the other. And sometimes you can add more tiers to these. As you see, when you set this up, you really can only put 1 tray on a shelf near the sun. I actually have another one of these that I bought that's bigger, that's a 5x5. That was $49. That's going out on my deck as soon as it gets a little warmer. I'm looking out right now, it's 28 out. So once it gets a little warmer, however, these little greenhouses tend to want to blow away in the wind. So if you're going to do that, you either put some cement blocks in the bottom of it to hold it down, or what I've done, I put 4 screw eyes on either side of it. And then I have a rope that comes up and over and then through the pipes and back down, and then there's a bungee cord for tension that hooks into the last hook on each side. This is one of the lights that I found the basic directions for this on the internet, and I like their design, but I didn't like their electrical much. Basically, it's a piece of 4-inch heating pipe that I've straightened out. The one on the internet had pieces of threaded rod through here to keep it out, but this is small enough, it doesn't really need it. And this bracket in here, let me move in a little bit so you can see it. This bracket is actually out of a ceiling lamp that has 2 bulbs in it, although this is a new one. I bought these at a home center. They're kind of hard to find, but you can get them on the internet. And the nice thing about this is that it's threaded on both ends, and I was able to put the ground wire up through here and ground this whole device. And also these connections that are in here, they're shrink wrapped. They've been soldered first of all, and then shrink wrapped to keep the water out, so that these are relatively safe. Make sure you wire these correctly, and if there's kids around, don't even turn it on while they're around. But this is properly wired, and if you're uncomfortable with that, find an electrician or somebody who knows how to do this. But these work real well, and I'm actually going to put 2 of these, one on each side of the top. And these are 60-watt equivalent bulbs, which are actually 13 watts each. So that'll work quite well. Another project. So good luck with your project. These little mini greenhouses are great for 10 bucks. Use a starter mix. Don't use topsoil, and clean everything. Remember, clean it all out well. Put a little bit of bleach water in there. The directions are in the first video. So good luck with your plants. Happy growing. Let me know how you do.